Before I said Kimi Antonelli even took the checkered flag at Spa, there was already a more important result sitting on the table. It came from Toto Wolff before qualifying even started, and it was the kind of thing a team boss says only when he has run out of better options. He told reporters his engineers had, in his words, left no stone unturned trying to find out why George Russell's car was losing speed down the straights. And then he admitted they still hadn't found it. In this video, you're going to understand why that sentence, spoken before a single lap was driven, matters more than anything that happened once the lights went out. Because by the end of the Belgian Grand Prix, George Russell was out of the race, his championship hopes took another direct hit, and the timing of Wolff's confession stopped looking like an update and started looking like a warning he gave without meaning to. Before we go further, if you're the kind of fan who wants to know what's actually happening behind the radio messages and not just what happens on the stopwatch, hit subscribe now and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching this from. I want to know if this Mercedes story is landing the same way in Britain as it is in Brazil or Italy. So let's go back to Saturday. Kimi Antonelli, Russell's own teammate, took pole position at Spa-Francorchamps with a lap that Wolff himself admitted was close to unstoppable. Russell, meanwhile, was stuck behind, unable to explain why his car kept bleeding time on the long uphill blast from Raidillon to Les Combes. This wasn't a driving issue. Russell had already ruled that out publicly before the race even started, saying the gap to Antonelli wasn't about how he was driving the car, it was about how the car itself was deploying its energy. That's an important distinction, because it moves the blame away from the driver and directly onto the garage. And when a driver says that in public, a team boss has exactly two choices: fix it or explain why you can't. Wolff chose to explain. And here's the part that a lot of people scrolled past without noticing the weight of it. He said, quote, "With George, we need to find out the issues. There are some losses in the corners, but there are also quite some losses on the straights, and we have been trying to find out what that is and couldn't up until now." Read that again. A team principal, on the record, admitting that his engineering department could not solve a problem affecting one of his two contracted drivers in a championship year with a teammate who was thriving in the exact same machinery just a few feet away in the same garage. That is not a small admission. That's the kind of statement that either means the problem is genuinely a mystery, or it means the team's attention, resources, and urgency were not evenly split between two cars wearing the same livery. Which brings us to the question that should be sitting in your head right now. Was this really unsolvable? Or was solving it simply never the priority it should have been? Here's what makes this even harder to explain away as bad luck. Antonelli, in the same car, under the same regulations, with the same power unit architecture, was not just competitive, he was dominant enough to take pole and lead Wolff to publicly praise him as close to untouchable. If the fundamental issue was a systemic flaw in the Mercedes power unit's energy deployment, you would expect to see some trace of that same weakness in Antonelli's data too. Instead, one side of the garage was flying, and the other side was quietly bleeding time down every straight at the fastest permanent circuit on the calendar. A track where straight-line speed isn't a small disadvantage. It's the entire difference between fighting for a podium and getting swallowed by the pack before turn 5. And that's exactly what happened. Russell started third. By the time the field reached Les Combes on the opening lap, he had already been passed by Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton. He tried to go around the outside of Hamilton on the brakes. Contact was made. Russell was pitched into the gravel trap and his race, and by extension, a meaningful chunk of his championship campaign ended before the first lap was even complete. Now, on the surface, this looks like a racing incident, and Russell himself said as much afterward, telling reporters, quote, "Me and Lewis, honestly, I think it was a race incident. He didn't do it on purpose." But listen closely to what Russell said right after that, because this is the part almost nobody is talking about. He said he was more angry about being in that vulnerable position in the first place than he was about the actual contact. In his own words, he said that was one of the things he was most angry about, that he found himself swamped by 3 drivers after a great start, purely because his car didn't have the speed to defend the position he'd earned. In other words, the crash wasn't the failure. The crash was simply the visible symptom of a failure that Toto Wolff had already confessed to, in public, less than 48 hours earlier. Do you see the chain now? Wolff admits the team can't explain a straight-line deficit. Russell qualifies behind his teammate because of that exact deficit. Russell starts the race exposed on the straight because of that exact deficit. Russell gets swallowed by faster cars on the straight because of that exact deficit. Russell is out of the race, out of points, and further behind in the championship because of that exact deficit. Every domino in that chain traces back to one sentence spoken before a wheel had even turned in anger. So follow the chain all the way to its logical end and ask yourself this. If you were running a Formula One team and you had two drivers in identical machinery and one was flying while the other was quietly falling behind, lap after lap, session after session, would you accept the explanation that it's simply unexplainable? Or does a team principal owe that driver one more real attempt before writing it off as a mystery? Here's the verdict, and it's not a comfortable one. Toto Wolff didn't confirm a technical mystery before the Belgian Grand Prix. He confirmed a priority. Whether he meant to say it that plainly or not, what he told the world was that Mercedes' engineering effort had already, functionally, started building its campaign around one driver, and was still trying to catch up on the other. George Russell's crash at Les Combes wasn't a freak accident that came out of nowhere. It was the inevitable, almost mathematical outcome of a deficit his own team boss had already stood in front of cameras and admitted he couldn't fix. And once a boss says that kind of thing out loud, in a championship year, with a talented young teammate outperforming everyone in the same garage, it stops being an engineering update. It becomes a signal about where the real support inside that team is actually going. Is Russell simply a driver whose car has a genuine, unsolved fault? Or is he watching his team's attention drift toward the other side of the garage in real time? Tell me what you think in the comments. And tell me if you'd have accepted that answer from your own team boss, or if you'd be demanding a different one. Until the next one.